Good morning, everybody. Just like to share a few words for the upcoming end of Yontif, Sheveee Shel Pesach, and Achron Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach, and the eighth day of Pesach. And I'd like to also, of course, wish Refuah Shlema, daven for Refuah Shlema for all those who need. They should have a Yeshua and Refuah B'karov. Sheveee Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach, we commemorate Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea. On the 15th day of Nisan, the Jews left Egypt, and yet a week later they found themselves trapped by the Red Sea, the oncoming Egyptian army behind them, wilderness, impenetrable wilderness on either side, and of course the Red Sea in front of them. And the Midrash tells us, based on various implications in the verses, that the Jews at that time broke down into four groups of people. They broke down into ones who wanted to just wave the white flag and give up and submit to the Egyptians, go back into slavery. Those who were in despair wanted to commit suicide and jump into the Red Sea. Those who wanted to militarily fight the Egyptians, and those who said the answer lies in just praying to God. And of course, Hashem tells Moshe that, well, of course, prayer is positive, and we always have to look to God and pray to God. Now is the time to take positive action. Daber el bnei Yisrael v'so. Neither of the four groups were really fully right. Now is the time to forward march into the sea, and you'll see what's going to happen, how I'm going to save you. And many have pointed out that this is really a paradigm. Sometimes we find ourselves in a difficult situation in life, as we do, currently. People have different reactions. Sometimes people want to be aggressive and fight their way out of a predicament. Sometimes they say everything is just pray to God and God will take care of everything. Sometimes people give up in despair. But neither of these options is really the correct attitude necessarily. One finds oneself trapped in a certain predicament. Sometimes the right answer is Daber el bnei Yisrael v'so. Just forward march. Take some kind of positive action in the right direction. They were headed towards Eretz Yisrael. Take some kind of positive step in that direction, and you'll see how God can split the sea for you, how God can help you out. Move in the forward, just confidently. Of course, prayer is always a component, but also take some positive action, and you can see how unexpectedly the sea could split for you, how just a little step in the right direction, just positive action, forward movement in the right direction could help oftentimes resolve the difficult situation in which we find ourselves in. So I think that's an important lesson for us currently. We're just kind of taking one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other. We obviously find ourselves in a difficult predicament, but just take one day at a time, one hour at a time, one moment at a time, move forward with a positive frame of mind, with faith in God. Of course, we have to pray to God to help us. But I think that's an important lesson to remember. Sometimes when we find ourselves trapped, the right answer is just take one small step in the right direction, as Nachshon ben Aminadab and the Jews did. They forward march into the sea up to their nose. They didn't know exactly how the situation would resolve itself, but God said, take some positive action, forward march, and of course, after we took our action, God did the rest and split the sea. And the Jews, of course, emerged on dry land. And the Jewish pursuers, the Egyptians, were drowned after the sea collapsed on them. So I think it's an important lesson. Sometimes when you find yourself trapped in a certain situation, seemingly no good option, sometimes just take some positive action, deal with it one good step, one positive step at a time, and we'll see, God willing, how God can and will help us out of our difficult situation. I think it's an important lesson. Then finally, the eighth day of Pesach, Achron Shel Pesach, which applies, of course, only in Chutz La'aretz. In Israel, they don't have a second day, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galios, but the Haftorah, which we read only in Chutz La'aretz, is dedicated to the ultimate redemption, the future redemption and Mashiach. It describes famously how the sheep will lie down with the wolf, and there'll be peace, world peace, and the world will be full of knowledge of God, and Mashiach will be very righteous and powerful person. So it essentially describes Mashiach and the Messianic era, looking forward to the ultimate redemption. So I think just that mere notion is a very powerful notion. As we talked about previously, that sometimes we get caught up in looking towards the past. Of course, we've had a very glorious past, and really that's what the Yom Tov of Pesach is dedicated towards, commemoration and reliving to a certain extent Yetzias Mitzrayim, which happened over 3,300 years ago. But we sometimes forget that really the big finale is still ahead of us. The ultimate Gula, there really even though we find ourselves back in exile. So we're celebrating our redemption, but we find ourselves back in exile. But Achron Shel Pesach is a reminder when we read the Haftorah of Mashiach and the Messianic era that even though we find ourselves in difficult straits currently, we find ourselves back in exile. The end of Jewish history is for sure going to be sweet. There is a light, to borrow the term that's being used and thrown around constantly. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Not only a little bit of a light, a flicker of hope, but actually a very bright light, the greatest light that's ever been, there'll be world peace, which there never has been. There'll be the Jewish people will be back in the land of Israel. The third temple will be rebuilt. The whole world will know and worship the one true God, the God of the Jewish people. And so the ending is going to be a tremendously powerful and beautiful ending. So that is what the Achron Shel Pesach, the eighth day of Pesach, is commemorative. Oh, well, can't really commemorate, but something which hasn't happened yet, but what looks forward to the ultimate redemption. And that's something also to keep in mind in our difficult period, that we are in current difficult straits, but the end will certainly be a positive and wonderful ending, and that is what Achron Shel Pesach, the eighth day of Pesach, is dedicated towards. The whole Yontif, we've been commemorating Yetzias Mitzrayim and the redemption from Egypt, and now on the eighth day at the end of the holiday, we look forward to the final redemption, which will be the complete and ultimate and lasting redemption. And God will take us out of all of our current difficulties and travails and exile. So may we merit that. May we be zocha through the celebration of this holiday of Pesach, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, and looking back and celebrating our wonderful past and our wonderful history, and really reliving it to the extent possible, each going out of our own personal Egypts, each splitting of our own Red Seas, going through and overcoming our own personal difficulties, both individually and communally. In that merit, may we be zocha to what we celebrate on Achron Shel Pesach, which is the full and complete redemption. May we merit speedily in our time. Merav Yameinu Amen. Chag kosher v'sameach. Enjoy the rest of Yontif.